It must have been 10 years ago when Valerie joined my team in consumer lending as a product manager. I was still working in banking back then, and I remember being impressed with her background as a math major. But until that time, she had been working in a call center role in jobs that barely harnessed her talents. From that first collaboration, we've kept in touch, and she quickly moved around from banks based in the Philippines to New Zealand, and she is now currently based in London, working at the headquarters of a global bank, and also finishing a master's degree in complex systems mathematics. Welcome to Data Ethics Conversations. Today, our conversation takes a more personal tone with Valerie dela Cruz, mathematician and wholesale bank risk manager. We will talk about how she built a career based on math, how she navigated cultures, moving around countries, and hear about the life lessons of a woman in STEM. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter at EthicsPH, and also on LinkedIn at DataEthicsPH. And now my conversation with Valerie dela Cruz.
Hi, Doc. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so how's the very cliche beginning? How's the weather in London?
Yeah. Well, that is a very cliche beginning. This is the beginning of a small talk. The weather in London is nice today. We're beginning to feel some early signs of spring. There's not many days where there's sun, but now there is, as you can see probably from the screen. So it's a very pleasant, somewhat cold but pleasant day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to thank you for agreeing, despite the time zone difference, to have this chat. So anyway, what do you want to talk about, or how do you want to start? I mean, I remember before this call, we were thinking about maybe sharing what's a typical what's the life of someone like you who's moved from many countries, actually, right? The last time we worked together, we were in an Australian bank, and then you moved to New Zealand, and now you're in the UK, and someone who's got a math background, like legit mathematician. So maybe, I don't know, how do you want to start? You feel free to share anything.
No, I'm coming from the context of, I guess, there's an overall theme going on this month. There's an International Women's Month, but they can talk about whether or not we're comfortable with that idea. But then I'm happy to share a bit of my journey from banking in the Philippines. Starting with a maths background in uni, and then going to banking, and then moving roles from different areas of the bank, and moving geographies from the Philippines, having a short stint in Australia, and then having moved to New Zealand, and then living there for 2 years, and then moving here to the UK. I've been in the UK for 3.5 years now, and so over the last let's say 5 to 7 years, it's been a real transition in many aspects of my life. Maybe there's some bits I could share that might be useful for people to kind of pick up, and some lessons along the way. I also have a maths background. I don't know how I don't know how to express it in a way such that I could actually convey that math is fun. I don't consider myself the best at it, but I like doing it, and I consider it as one of the tools that I brought with me as I went along my career journey. I might not have been in a mathematics heavy role from the very beginning, but over time, the analysis aspect of it really helped me along the way. So.
But I don't know, and I don't want to start again with yet another cliche, but I think nowadays there's a lot of talk about encouraging more women into STEM, for example. And but here's someone such as yourself who actually started in math. So what I mean, maybe can you share a little bit about that? What got you? I mean, if you can remember back when you were considering what to study in college, in university. So why mathematics?
We started, when in uni in the Philippines, we go to uni at 16, and so we start thinking about it maybe 15, maybe earlier. I consider it like, okay, I like mathematics and I considered myself good at it at that time. But well, and then I wanted to be um, I wanted to be in banking. So as I thought, hey, I could combine maths and I could combine some trying to understand financial industry with a lot of maths. So I went into I chose BS mathematics. The funny thing about it is everything that we trained for up to high school is only one semester in uni, and then everything else is like new. So it's a massive expansion of what math really was at the time, when I went to uni. Um, so I chose math mainly because I liked it and I thought I was good at it. Um, and I wanted it to be my main tool to go and try to understand patterns. I wanted to understand many things about the economy, and then that was my main motivation.
And then, do you remember if there were many women in your math in your math class, or is that too much
Oh
of a
yeah,
stereotype?
um, it's from memory, it's about maybe 60-40, 60 men and 40% women. It was okay. I mean, I remember the top students were females, were women in my batch. So I don't think there was a lot of stigma for women to enter the mathematics program. Although here, I'm studying a master's in mathematics and applied mathematics right now. It's less. Maybe out of 20, there's 4 or 5 women.
So
Um,
in the UK or everywhere else, talagang there's less women taking up math. Parang ganun.
from my observations, there could be more. It's not a 50-50, definitely not. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot of push, just also because there's a lot of room to diversify. And I've also tried to understand a little bit about it. There's a partly cultural, there's from generations back, when women were we have gender roles. When in Filipino, when you say something like pwede ka na mag-asawa when you start learning to cook, right? And then that's usually said to women, something like
Wow,
that.
that's so traditional, no? Women are supposed
So
to cook.
yeah, exactly. So I don't see it as the only kind influencer, but I think it's a significant it's a sign that it is embedded in the culture that you're supposed to do this if you're a woman and you're supposed to do that if you're a man. So there's a cultural expectation there. And second is, yeah, there's probably also because of that, it propagates up to when you're about to choose a course. Um, for example, my sister is in engineering. She's probably, I don't know, 10. There's only 10% of engineering students are women. It's even in her class. So and she also talks about her experience in the past where when the students are formed into groups, the men would typically choose fellow boys, and then the girls would be like marginalized. So it's not very encouraging, but over time it's probably going to change.
Yeah. So okay, so you started with BS math, and
Yes.
then okay, so talk through that, no? So you graduate
Yeah, BS math
mathematics.
was yeah, BS math is very interesting in UP because there's a lot of abstract um, mathematics that we learned, and then there was only three paths that we were told. Well, at least it was marketed to us. One was actuarial, so you want to go to the insurance industry, model risk, and all that. And then the second one, of course, was the academe. You want to teach mathematics, and the third one was research, operations research, which is there wasn't really a place for. I mean, at least at 16, I thought, okay, where do I go?
And you didn't land in insurance,
No.
thankfully.
No, it was an interesting journey for me because I really, really wanted to go to banking. I knew at 6 years old, I knew I wanted to work in a bank. Mainly first because my mom brought me to the bank and saw they were counting money. I thought that was what are you doing with that? And then my father, he's an OFW, so he worked in Saudi Arabia for most his adult life, and then when he sent back money, so he earned in dollars and he sent back money, the value would fluctuate. So I wanted to understand that. It was weird. And money was never a stable thing in our family. So I wanted to understand, how do people actually manage to have stable income, and how does the world manipulate our money in such a way that it would change in value. So anyway, those were the motivations over the years. And then as soon as I graduated BS Mathematics, I found myself walking along the streets of Ayala and handing out my CVs to banks. And there wasn't much opportunity for analysts with I had a requirement that it would pay a little bit more than the entry level, because I live far away. I need to, I wanted to save up a little bit. So I took going now to my choice of first role, I took a role in banking, but it wasn't really an analyst role. It was a call center role. But still, I thought, okay, this is a foot in the door, and it was a decent pay and a big organization. So I landed there, and I've stayed in banking ever since.
Pero I can imagine, no, na for a hardcore BS math, because obviously, especially when you talk analytics, karamihan would be BS stat, which is
Yeah,
another parang sort of another math. So you're like from the hardcore math field, no?
yeah.
And then syempre, if you think about it, tama, no? If you want to know how money works, go to a bank. And syempre, what is banking but numbers? So yeah, let's study math. And then now you're finally getting a job, but it's not necessarily the banking job you thought it would be. It's like talking to people on the phone, no? So can you talk a little bit about that, and then how did you eventually transition to kind of the, I don't want to say real, because that was a real job, pero parang the ideal banking job? Or did you ever get to your ideal banking job?
No, yeah, no. At this point, I think I consider myself, I've gotten the analytical kind of job that I wanted. I ever since wanted to have, and I have at this point. Well, having spent 15 years in banking, I think I have a decent knowledge of how the industry works. Obviously, I could go more, but at this point, I could say a thing or two about it. But you're right. We started in the call center. I started in the call center, taking phone calls from customers, credit card clients. We had a target of 120 calls per day, and then we had a cross-selling target of, I don't know, 3 or 5 banking products a day. So I did that for 3 years. When you kind of get into a more senior position, they move you to a sales role. So and then that was the time I called clients and say, look, do you want to have a balance transfer on your credit card, or a personal loan on your credit card?
Sounds like hardcore banking.
Yes, literally. And then you had the spiel. they had to say like these first three lines, and you have to. It's a very structured routine. I can't say it was my favorite job. I took a lot of uh, learnings from it, though, and of course the network, the friends we built, friendships we built along the way was great. We were still friends at this point because you have this common their shared experience of having a bad day with the customer, irate, getting mad at you. And obviously there's this camaraderie when you have a common sales target and you want to achieve that. That was fun. There's a little competition going on during that time. But having entered banking, I've targeted some of the roles that were a bit more closer to how decisions are made at the back end. So I did apply for a management role, a few management roles actually. Some of them worked out, some of them didn't. And then I eventually transitioned when I had applied for your team in product management, which really opened a lot of doors for me. That was nice.
Yeah, so for the people watching, no, that's when we finally worked together. Valerie and I worked together in a global bank. At that time, trabaho ko nun. I was managing consumer lending products for a global bank. And here was a mathematician who was answering phone calls very well. One of the best in their field. But I've always wondered, I don't know if I ever asked this question. So right before you moved, parang we joined forces, no? So right at that moment, right before that, did it ever occur to you na, you came out of university, going through really some really tough mathematics, I don't know, calculus, differential equations and all that. And then now the very definition of a tough day at work is an irate customer. Did you ever feel that yung parang gap, no, between what you thought the job would be and finally what it was?
Oh yes, every day I thought, what did I do in uni? Bakit ako nag-mathematics? And then how did I end up here? It's always been a case of, okay, I had optimized my my options where I got the pay I wanted. I got, or at least the highest pay I thought I sort of was offered, and I would just step inside a bank, and I'm just gonna work it from there. I think it's more, even if I did a hard mathematics in college, there was a lot of social learnings as well from the call center role, how to relate with customers. I understand this now in hindsight. At the time, it was not so much fun, but now it's something that I wouldn't discard as a valuable impact in my life.
So sige, so you moved into your next, I guess the next big step was working in a product management role, no? So can you talk about that? Like, I'll talk about it the way you understood it. No, I don't want to talk about it the way I understood it.
No, I want to talk about as we go to that role. I wanted to mention a little bit more about um, mentoring. So I really find it as still now. I mean, it was a huge impact that you didn't have. It didn't seem to me that you were this you listened to me to my opinion as if it was at par with yours. And I'm saying that because at that time I was really, really not believing that. I mean, I was, how there's a term called fraud syndrome. So you think that it's very common, I find.
Imposter syndrome.
Exactly. Yes. Uh, uh, it's very common for women, I think. It's only because I haven't spoken to men a lot about it. So I don't know about men's view on that, but for women who have shared their views with me, we there's a lot of women who experience this a lot, where you think you're only you're pretending to begin, then you feel like they'll find out later you're not. So that feeling was with me at the time when I was interviewing for a role in your team. I was every day when I come to work, I had that feeling, but of course I put up like a show that is, I feel like I should be professional, but then deep inside it wasn't really the feeling I had that I was good enough. So I value conversations like how that what we've had um, coming to the team was great, because it was the ideas that were valued, not where you're coming from, how do you look, or um, you know what kind of background you have. It's not the same in other teams where it kind of matters what kind of handbag do you have to work, bringing to work, or there's subtle differences. So I really enjoy that a lot. So when it comes to transitions, I do tend to encourage um, men seeking out a mentor. I don't think it happens like in a flash. No, it's like you have first a conversation, and then I find that we have it was fun and was insightful, and then you have another conversation where you think that you're both learning from each other, and then you continue on, and I think that builds a lot of confidence, especially for me at the time, and so did the team. So the team within the product management team, um, we were collaborative with the idea. So that was a really fun experience. And then of course the topics that we're talking about were you know P&L, assets growing, balances growing, how to grow this, what to do with the costs, and all those things. A lot of other new topics. That was nice. That was good.
Yeah, if I don't know, I'm trying to remember, and I don't know if I'm just siguro naive, no, but I and even up to now, I guess I'm more ironically I'm more aware of gender issues now after decades. But even back then, like I remember the first time you popped into the office, at least our team. I never thought about it in terms of gender. No, like I remember there was ilan ba tayo? Four of us.
Yeah.
Uh, you, me, Stephanie, and Charles. No? So two men, two women. I didn't even do a gender count.
No.
But I thought about these were four people who are genuinely talented, genuinely skilled, irrespective of gender. That's how I thought about it. Of course, one thing that I would have, I was also looking for is it didn't really matter too much what the past experience was. It's more about can such a person handle future challenges. The math background helped, just to let you know, after all these years. Because I remember si Charles, he was kind of a genius na pagdating dyan. And that's why I occasionally still struggle with trying to understand the imposter syndrome. Because it's something that seems to haunt a lot of women mostly. Pero I've seen men with the imposter syndrome then. That feeling of inadequacy. I mean, do you remember that, or do you still experience
Oh
that? Is it
yeah.
is it brought about by trauma or pressure or some preconceived notion? I don't know. Just thinking out loud. No?
It's mostly brought about by I think there's a lot of social pressure. Um, in the Philippines, I think there's social pressure for women to not appear ambitious. So you kind of think you have to be quiet, you have to be careful. Of course, everyone has to be careful with voicing out their opinion, but it's more held back for women. I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure it's changing over time. At that time, it's progressing. I'm speaking from my experience. It's that, and it's more, especially in the technical fields, it's mathematics, STEM, and programming, and compute, and engineering. Women feel a bit less adequate in a sense, because even if they do feel competent, they have to also hide it a little bit. So that's largely my view of how it is, and I have it takes years to undo it. I feel like I've like 90% there in terms of feeling okay, I can do this, no worries. But it's been a journey to think that it was mostly, can I really do this? But in front of of course, in front of the stakeholders or the colleagues, you put up a confident stand, and that's also a skill. But then you have to also work internally to overcome this feeling. I do sense it as well when I myself mentor or try to impart a little bit knowledge to junior analysts, to say, look, it's okay. You can say what you think. And there's one anecdote actually that there's one anecdote I remember from talking to a stakeholder, because in the Philippines, in my experience, you're rewarded if you echo what your boss thinks. In general, I'm not saying it's for all experiences. If you have a slightly different opinion, you might want to hide it a little bit. But in analysis, you have to say it. You have to say your view based on what you have concluded from the data or whatever analysis you did. So I feel like you're on the same level. You're on the same level when you finally get to the point where you know that your brain is rented out. You're giving your analysis to another person or to a team because they value whatever you conclude, and not simply by saying yes or saying yep, I agree with you because you're the boss or because you have more influence than me. I do feel that there should be a transition for women, for junior women, to get to that point where they believe that their opinion would be valuable. So yeah, in terms of systematically doing that for companies, I hope there's more effort to do that than what I have observed in the past. Because it can only get better when you have competent and confident analysts, regardless of their sexual preference.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I'm trying to relate it to my case because I started also in financial services. Kaya nga, I was gender blind, no? And I tried to be that way. Pero yun na nga, nowadays, sabi nga nila, it's fashionable to be woke, no? Pero even back then, I think the most I experienced was age discrimination.
Oh yes, there's also that.
So age and tenure. Like, hey kid, you haven't been around this long. Medyo makinig ka muna. And that really pissed me off. No, I mean, especially if you're in a, kasi back in the day there was no such thing as analytics, no?
Oh yeah, that's
only
right.
became a thing after. So you were an analyst, but when you say analytics, you're like using data to craft decisions. And siguro it's less so now, but back in the day, data was just an outcome of a decision. It's not a prompt. It's something you report. It's something you report, but it's not something that drives a decision. So analytics was a very refreshing approach. Na suddenly the data can help you make decisions. The math can help you make decisions.
Yeah.
And then I get the discrimination na, hey kid, I've been doing this long before your math and your data came out.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Ganyan, diba? But I suppose it's a little harder pa siguro if you add the gender problem there, no? Na, hey young girl, or
yeah.
we have a word for it, the iha. You know, the moment the
Oh
iha
yeah,
and the iho comes in the conversation, wala na, tapos na. You know,
yeah,
there's
that's
no
true.
arguing around that. No. Did you ever struggle dealing with non-mathematical people? I mean, not necessarily people who didn't have a math background, but people who struggle thinking in math terms. Did you ever have that?
I'm I'm
Lalo mga boss
struggling.
ah.
Struggling in a sense. Actually, mathematics is more when dealing with the general audience, you um, tend to not use mathematical terms, but in the language that they or whoever that they use in day-to-day life, if you know it. So what I really like is when we get a common understanding based on the logic of arguments. It's just not necessarily mathematics, but it is actually mathematics is logic. So that's where that's where I try to find a common ground. Now the struggle is when the logic doesn't make sense or the arguments don't make sense. Um, so not so much as to convey or communicate in mathematical terms, but it's more to get in a common understanding of the what are the premises, what are we trying to achieve, and how are we trying to achieve it based on a certain set of or no, or constraints or optimization or strategy that we're trying to arrive at. There it's not without challenge to communicate that to a diverse set of people. The thing to I guess to carry around when you try to do that is know the background of the person and active listening and come prepared with knowledge or data or some insights with you so that you can influence better. Now, that's what I kind of try to do, and most of the time it works.
Yeah, I think ano nga eh. Kasi one thing that I don't know if how much of this you'll relate to, lalo na in a different country, maybe it's a little different. Um, I've always thought the enemy of analytics is politics, because, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be political. I mean, data ethics is anything, if anything, is a political exercise, no. But back in the day, I struggled with that kasi nga it felt comforting just using data, just using math, just using logic. Na okay, here's a logical progression between, okay, you parang economics, no, with lower prices more people will buy, but real life that doesn't necessarily happen.
No.
And usually yung balancing figure is political, no? Or if
Yes.
even in an organization na, why are they doing, I mean, we were both witness to some really stupid decisions, honestly, in how the business was run, and you wonder, why don't they just do it? The numbers indicate it, the rules say so. And then you find out later, okay, because someone's reputation will be damaged if they do it or they don't do it, or someone important made this decision and we can't say no, and then you have to bend everything around that person. So politics, no, parang sabi ko, and I always struggled with that. So in your case, siguro, parang being a mathematician at heart, no, did you ever have that parang challenge with politically driven decisions, politically driven people, or how did you handle politics yourself now in your career?
I think I completely agree with that. There's always going to be an element of politics when it comes to decision making. Um, some organizations do it better than others in terms of listening to the data. I think it's just a matter of time when data will be kind of more influential. And also as a maybe as a from experience with the during as when at the start of um, my career, it's more data wasn't really that much of a like you said, it wasn't a big tool before for decision making. It was more an outcome rather than an input. In terms of dealing with politically driven decisions, I try to make it. I try to assess whether there is something to be won out of a political battle, because oftentimes those who have the political influence will be in a much more bigger position than I am. Um, and I think they would have some considerations that I wouldn't know of. I'm only guessing from my point of view. So from that standpoint, if I know there's something to be won, let's say there's something to be there's actually value in putting forward an opinion that's not necessarily politically palatable, I would do it. But I think if there's none to be won, very little at least, I just um, uh, you know keep it to myself. And over time, there's going to be lots of those small decisions that one will have to make with, especially if you're working for a big organization. Navigating through political motivations and hierarchies will be a key skill. So it's not to discount um, political skills, really. It has to be there. You have to have it in order for you to drive your agenda. So it's a mix of both um, your data skills and your interpretation of the data, and then your communication of data. I think those are sort of three different areas where um, it's worth striving to be good at.
Do you ever, I don't know if this is an appropriate question, no, pero do you ever see being a woman as a political power in any
Oh yeah,
circumstance?
actually, yes. It is. The thing is, like you say, it's fashionable to be of at the moment to be a woman. It's a nice statistic to have. You have you have a non-Western woman in an analytical role. It's kind of ticks all the boxes. Obviously,
Yeah, you're young, you're female, you're Asian. Parang all in one, no?
like ang ganda sa diversity statistics, no? No, but I think to your question, it is an advantage in many aspects where um, you're not the norm, so you get more attention at least at the beginning. Obviously, you have to prove you can't stay long if you can't prove your competence over time, right? But you get some attention. There's drawbacks to that as well. So sometimes when I see pushes for in the news, let's say people would push for more women in the board or more women in driving a statistic. I don't think that would work in many ways, because you're choosing. It's it defeats the purpose. You're choosing a woman over a man because she's a woman, when that's a whole point that you want to discourage, gender discrimination. But I think this whole push for more women in the workplace will happen over time. I think because we're just getting there. Parang we want to push something to maybe 50-50. We'll overshoot it a little bit, and then we'll get somewhere in the middle. So I think we're on the brink of overshooting a little bit, because we're not on the brink of, but we're getting there. We're trying to push more because she's a woman, then she should be in this position, which kind of defeats the purpose. But I think it's a natural process over time, and then we'll kind of get the balance in many years.
When you talk about overshooting, do you see people overcompensating naman? Kunyari, they always try to make sure they hear you out. I'm just imagining scenarios lang. Kasi kaya nga, being gender blind, no? So, but having a woman in the room, you want to make sure, do people try too hard to make sure they entertain their opinion, or they give them the widest accommodation? May mga ganun ba? Does that really happen?
In my case, no, it has not happened. It's really an advantage to, when I moved to from Philippines to New Zealand, and then suddenly I found myself like one of three women where the meeting was all about with senior banking managers, and I was to present something, and the feeling was they actually wanted my opinion, but not because I was a woman, because it was just because I had something to bring into the table. So that's a real shocker for me. But to get to the point where it didn't feel like they made it. They made it, made an effort out of to have me heard, because it was already the natural point for them to say to hear someone's opinion, regardless of what they look like or what their gender is. Um, and it's a very nice feeling as well, I still have here in London, where I just put forward my view without considering whether they would want to hear it or not, because of my gender. So that's one of the advantages, I guess, of a more um, heterogeneous kind of workplace. Um, so that's lucky, and I understand that not many. There's gonna be some experiences that won't be the same as mine. So yeah.
No, I mean, I think the value of listening to someone who, I don't know, call it lucky na nga, who's been as lucky as you have been, is it's not a one-sided world, no? There's an alternative. Or maka, and again, I don't know if it's appropriate to say it, baka na-hype lang masyado yung, I don't even know if it's a stereotype where women are prevented from achieving things. Uh, I mean, clearly there's a gap for one reason or another. There are gaps. Pero then here's someone like you. Now you've slid through those gaps, no? Like a knife through butter, sabi nga nila. From starting as an entry level call center worker to now, working in a global headquarters of a global bank in the UK. Parang wow, no? I mean, you can say it's 15 years, but still, in 15 years, so many people aren't that fortunate or aren't that lucky, and here you are talking about it. Yeah. Okay. Let's bring it back to math, kasi yun yung love mo eh. So
Yeah.
tell us about that, or what's up with your, I don't know, your master's degree, or what's up with math that you want to talk about.
Um, yeah, okay. I think so. Math is basically driving a lot of my, I mean, what I do in my spare time, really, also in my work. Because math for me is it's just the language that I use for understanding patterns, the language that we use all to understanding the world. In when you program, when you deal with data, you deal with logic, and you have to make sure that the arguments are logical. And then when it comes to the masters I'm doing right now, I'm learning heaps of mathematics applied to a lot of timely events like COVID-19, for example. We model pandemic, the famous R naught is from ordinary differential equations of motion, and um, also some of them borrowed from physics, for example. We borrow a lot of methodologies from that area. So I think if I was to send a message, it's more to see math not as a mechanical process. You have to memorize the multiplication tables when in uni, or when you're when you're a kid. But I'm hoping that at a very early level, or at a young age, people are encouraging their kids to see math as something that is about finding patterns. um, and to see math right now, when I studied it 15 years ago, when 15 to 20 years ago in college, I was seeing, matrices as kind of computations and calculations. Now I see it as tools to understand transformations, tools to understand networks. And there's a great deal of knowledge that's out there, and we can understand it because we have mathematics.
Yeah, can you talk about anything mathematical? Syempre, obviously, not everyone watching this or listening to this is a mathematician. No? Anything? So,
Yes.
share with us something fun about math that you love to talk about. Or you mentioned you have a couple of projects that you're working on.
Yeah, it's more so right now it's really good to understand how to model events, right? So if we're interested in predicting something, let's say you want to predict the probability of default, which is sort of it's a standard one for banks. What is built? How are those models built? Is what I'm trying to be better at, if you like. So when you consider building a model, you have to consider the model complexity that you're bringing in. You have to consider how optimized you want the model to be and to optimize to what. And I'm talking about, let's say, you have a data set where you can fit a curve precisely, but then you have also that trouble when you have, I don't know if I'm talking jargon now, but if you have new input data and then you suddenly find your prediction to be way off the mark, which means that you have a problem of overfitting. So there's a lot of statistical tools that we are learning right now in order to address that problem. And that was, what's driving our technology right now, where the self-driving cars, for example, are already in the market, and that's all about mathematics. It's all about probability of the pixel being part of the grass or pixel being part of the clouds or something. It's a lot to do with the machinery, the mathematical machinery behind it. So I love learning about networks. So we're all about social media right now, and we all have our Twitters and Facebooks and LinkedIn's. When I learned about networks, it's actually you and me, for example, we're connected in a graph that's represented by a matrix, and a matrix you can do calculations, and a matrix is just a transformation, and you can do statistics on who's the most connected and who's more likely to generate the biggest influence on the network, or all those things. So there's also obviously generating random networks that we can do statistics on, and right now there's a lot of research out there that pertains to how to market your products online on Facebook, who you're going to target, and how likely it is for one node or one person to click on your ad based on how his or her network is set up, right? So I'm talking a lot about applications, but I also want to emphasize that there's the training that comes behind it. So if you learn about your differential equations back in high school or university, that you carry those along, and you use them as tools to understand the patterns and to understand rates of change, which is a lot of which we deal with a lot right now when it comes to modeling pandemics. And actually vaccination strategies has a lot to do with networks as well. So you want to vaccinate we know, for example, that for an R naught between 3 to 5, your immunization should be between 70 to 85% of a lot of because of the workings behind it again of differential equations, um, where we do that. So it's I could talk a lot about, but I'm gonna have what I'm looking forward to is learning more about classification. So there's statistics around going how to classify one person as sorry, let's say default or not default is classic because we're in banking. But there's a lot of ways to do that. One is through the Bayesian method. If for people who have learned of Bayesian tree inference, that's it's something worthwhile, I think, to be good at if you want to learn inference. And there's also the other method where it's also a common one. It's a logistic regression. It could also be used in Bayes, but I would like to learn more. A lot more. I want to learn more about that and hope to achieve that within this year.
Is that the topic of your masters right now? Learning about classifiers and
Yes.
mga
Yeah.
Bayesian approaches.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something certainly that someone who has a math background can geek out on. No?
Yeah. Yes. Definitely. It's also to do with what can you do with the data actually. So if you have some knowledge about your training data, do you want to come up with a model that would describe your data, but then how do you know if your model is the best one? So there's a decision theory aspect to it where you can compare the plausibility of models by getting the probability of getting your data given the model you chose.
Is that
And
the p-value? Is that the the troublesome p-value that everyone complains about?
There's a lot. Yeah, there's that's also one of the obviously the more common approaches. There's this also called the evidence approximation, where again you get a per probability that you get your data given you have your chosen model. So obviously you want it's kind of the twisted, right? So you want a model that would describe your data, but to validate that you want an idea of getting the chances of you getting the data given your model. So kind of you want to validate your model choice. So that's one of the things that we can obviously have a conversation about as well when it comes to choosing models.
I mean, it brought to mind then, and I think this is good to link back to kind of parang yung starting point mo in your career. Obviously, when you were trying to get into banking, finally got a job in a bank, but not a mathematical one, or not an obviously mathematical one. And then now you're studying advanced mathematics and looking at how that applies to kunyari yan, mga probabilities of default. Is that too much of a jump for, let's say, a woman starting out in her career today? No? Kasi nga, if we go by the prevailing assumption na women are discouraged from entering STEM, or even if they did, they're discouraged from pursuing something that's technical, or even if they did, they're discouraged from voicing their opinion. So maybe it's a little bit of the cultural aspect, or even if they did, they're also discouraged from being what you mentioned earlier, being assertive, being aggressive. And then here you are, you seem to be enjoying all this parang freedom and benefit. No? I'm just trying to parang put it in the shoes of someone who might be listening today. No? A woman who's looking to get into something mathematical or something technical, or ngayon we call it data science, no? as a field that's in a way liberating a lot of women, no? Or potentially liberating a lot of women. Do you see that kind of as a big jump, or is that something that is perfectly plausible for any woman?
Um, I think it's a very if it has it's a build over time. So it feels like a big jump if we think about it as from one just 10 years ago to 5 years ago, because 10 years ago I was working in a call center, and then 5 years ago I was working as an analyst. But if we consider it or think about it as a build over time, where um, I was already thinking about it 20 years ago. And I just was like kind of navigating my around the industry, and finding the right conversations, or landing on the right conversations, because I was already thinking about such things. So if we look at it from that perspective, it's not a big jump. But for me, it has to be premeditated for a long time, not just a month, not just a year, maybe a few years. And I think if someone is getting like considering it, I would say build on it. It's not gonna be walk in the park. It's it has to be built, meaning to put in the hours. We have to put in the hours. We have to link up to the right people, or at least to like-minded people, in order to get to build that holistic view of the technical field you want to be in. So in my case, the building from the college degree of mathematics, bringing that along with me, making that conversation in the product management team, and then moving to the risk modeling team or methodology team in the Australian bank, and then moving to a managed capital management kind of role in New Zealand. So it's all about. It was a build up from the time I was still in uni, thinking about wanting to be in banking and wanting to be in an analysis role. So I approached you, for example, in product management, because I wanted to be somewhere in a team where they do analysis, they do insightful tasks that would bring insights, I mean. From that point of view, it is not a big jump. It is a long journey. Hopefully it could be less there's less hurdles over time, I think. And I think we're getting there, also because the availability of technology to everyone, and the less we stigmatize people from doing maths or STEM, then I say people regardless, women, men, then it will be a more diverse workplace, or a more diverse industry.
I understand. Well, up until recently, you've also picked up writing or blogging as a hobby.
Yeah, I
Uh,
have.
you wanna share a little bit of what you like to write about? Do you write about math? I mean, just wondering.
Yeah, I just when we talk about platforms being very accessible right now, so there's this platform called Medium. You write an article there, and you get to post some of your thoughts. I've written, I think, 36 or 37 articles already since May of last year, when we suddenly were in a lockdown, and had some commuting time out, back, just being here. I write about math. I write about um, poverty. I write about self-improvement as well. Um, One of the topics, or one of the articles that got a little bit more attention, was writing about poverty and risk. So I wrote, because my experience was more coming from a working class family in the Asian crisis. When the Asian crisis happened, I think I think rather I guess my thinking has been influenced largely by that experience. My father had to leave for work, and then our finances weren't stable. So I was very much exposed to oh yeah, that the what's it called? This is one of them. I write about completing the square. This is one of oh, by the way, the things that you want to be good at, maybe. Um, that's there's
It's a math blog. Amazing. You know, I don't
Oh
see
yeah,
many
but
of these
actually I have that blog. Look, the article before that is "Thank you for calling." It's about my experience
in the call center.
in the call center. Yeah, um, it's it's about lessons learned. Maybe I've talked about it a little bit already now. Um, and then there's a lot. There's this about travel. There's about something about the European Union. I wrote about grief because my father died 2 years ago, um, and some beliefs that when you move countries, some of your beliefs are shaken. I think it's more a realization that your core beliefs are culture specific, and then suddenly because I got exposed to people who with varying backgrounds. I realized that my notions of other people or how the world works was a lot to do with how the environment around me was before. Um, what this is about? Oh yeah, I'm a little bit. I have to be. We have to be a little bit realistic for me. For example, when we tell people that we tell kids that can be anything when you grow up. Well, actually, I can't be the president of the United States, can I? But um, it's more to be pragmatic about what we can achieve, I guess. To be realistic, I think there's a lot of wishful thinking, which encourages hopeful, aspirations. But we also have to blend in a little bit more realism to our goals. This
I
is
don't
what
know
it
if
says.
it was an outcome of like how long did we work together? Maybe 3 years, thereabouts,
three
no? Two
years, two
years.
and a half years. Yeah,
No.
exactly.
Kasi, well, obviously my path was a parallel one to yours with slightly different challenges. Financial challenges were there too, but of a different kind. Um, because I had I had commercial ventures that didn't work out, loans, uh, ondoy, those
Yeah,
are, so I can relate to that, no, yung financial challenges and yung you can be anything you want to be. Yeah, I agree kasi it's one thing to say wishful thinking, but it's also another thing to say but it's in your control, no, it's
yeah,
completely under your control, but
exactly.
you have to believe that it is, no. And I remember there was a point na parang things seemed, I mean in hindsight you look at it and said, kayang-kaya naman pala eh. Parang
Yeah,
what doesn't kill you makes you stronger and that kind of jazz, no. But I remember when I felt the bleakest moments in my life were always those moments where you feel it's not in your control, no? Parang ganun. Do you have similar episodes, no? Kasi I'm just trying to over summarize your path, no? You started out, I don't know, with very very hopeful beginnings, and then now you're globe hopping. Every several years you're in another country. Now you're in the UK. Um, and you talk about beliefs getting updated, getting challenged, no. So can you talk a little bit about that, how your perspective after traveling and after I don't know if are you going to be settling down in the UK, is that going to be your home country, so how did that change some of your beliefs?
there's a lot of beliefs that was shaken when I moved countries, and I'll tell you, that has a lot to do with that. A lot of it I've already mentioned about being okay. One thing is Filipinos think they're second class. to Westerners. I think that's, I don't know if it's still prevalent in
But
the
like
right
by
now.
default, parang ganun
By
ang
default, right? I
upbringing
think, you know,
natin.
there's this mentality that if he or she is a Westerner, she's gonna be better, or he or she better, smarter, richer, whatever. I think there's some truth to, in a sense, that there's some, the stereotype has backing, because people who travel to the Philippines have a little bit more money, have a little bit more, can a little bit more educated, and so what we see are the those that part of the demographic. So coming to going to other countries, I had this, I was so battling this feeling of I'm not good enough, because, well, I don't, for some irrational reason, that because I'm from where I'm from. That has changed, and I have the move to New Zealand to thank for that, because, like, that anecdote when suddenly I was presenting in front of senior banking managers, where nothing, they didn't bat an eye because I was some different race, some, or because I was a woman. I was there and they wanted to hear what I had to say. And I was shocked after that to say, oh my God, I'm really, like, I'm really in the international scene now, because they don't care. They don't care what I look like. And that's one of the things that was positively shaken. The other thing is exposure to many different perspectives gives you a little bit more grounding to um, the biases that you grew up with. Let's say, I don't know, it's a little bit controversial biases, like um, people who don't believe in God, or, tend to be not good people, for example. And there's and then coming to a rather agnostic society, it's completely not really relevant. It's a different system, right? You and then one of the it's sort of a thing where you come to terms with your biases and say, and this gets completely smashed, because it's not, it's just very culture specific. Now I talk about benefits, mind expansion, obviously getting in Western, in New Zealand and UK, things, most things work. Like, there's less corruption than the Philippines. There's less inconvenience because of the transportation, and there's less desperation in the streets. We see street children a lot in the Philippines, and in New Zealand and UK. There's homeless people, yes, but there's not as many. So that takes a lot of kind of worry, or at least stress, in your mind when you don't have as much exposure to that. But I also want to mention there are costs to moving countries, where it has to be cost. You get the benefits, but you have to be aware of the costs as well. You're paying for distance with your loved ones, with your friends back home. You tend to have you tend to form your trajectory. Your mental trajectory is different. You're not in you don't have the same shared experience, the same language, yung mga yung nauuso sa Pilipinas. Hindi ka na makaka-catch up, and then suddenly you're kind of a little bit left behind. And also the way you think will be very different. Or I mean, there's a thing about living abroad where you tend to be a citizen of nowhere, as some people might say, because you don't feel purely. I definitely don't feel purely British. I have adapted to some of the practices. I definitely don't feel purely. I wouldn't feel.
I'm actually surprised. I was telling you earlier that you haven't picked up the British slang or the British accent.
Yeah.
Because many Filipinos, siguro depends, no? You leave them in another country for a year, and they suddenly start talking like a Kiwi, talking like an Oz, and then now
Yes.
talking like a Brit. No, pero yeah,
Yeah.
you sound accent neutral. Pa rin.
It's just
Maybe it was the call center training, diba? They teach you.
yeah. No, the one beautiful thing I find beautiful about London is the diversity of the people here. I mean, someone said it's everyone's a minority here. I mean, my neighbor's Chinese. There's Eastern Europeans in my community. There's British in my community. There's in the workplace. I report to Europeans, Indians, from very different backgrounds. I've worked with I don't know how many backgrounds of I mean how diverse the backgrounds are. It's just massive. So it's a thing. It's a nice way to, I guess, retain your accent. It just because everyone's accent is different. And of course, if you're British, you have this you can tell, but the rest is from wherever they came from.
So London is about as melting pot, similar to maybe I guess New York City. Ganun na rin, everyone is pretty
Yeah,
diverse.
we looked at statistics. So I think 60% of Londoners have parents who are not from the UK. So it's one or two of the parents not from the UK. So it's very diverse. Uh, and so it's a very interesting experience. And you see in the train, you hear lots of different languages. Some of them you can recognize, some of them you don't. But having them speak at the same time is just wow. They can live in the same city and be just harmoniously live in the same city, which is it's just amazing.
Is there a big Filipino community in London? Um,
Um, I haven't seen a big gathering, but I think it's probably going to be Sunday mass where they we would typically see Filipinos. Um, I have some Filipinos colleagues at work. Um, again, it's not it's not going never going to be the majority, right? But there's not many in my experience. Yeah, at least where I work. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, but then
hindi
in the
katulad
market,
sa, for example, sa Singapore and Hong Kong, parang every other corner may Pinoy eh. Even in the airport, no, you're greeted as, uy, kabayan. Oh, wow.
yeah, yeah. Okay, in the health industry though, there's a lot of Filipinos, especially in the health industry actually. Um, I get asked whenever I'm recognized as Filipino at which hospital do I work in, but that's more because of statistics. There's just more Filipinos in the hospital, so maybe
Oo nga,
just
like nurses, caregivers, doctors, ganun, ano?
yeah.
I guess it's like the stereotypical engineer in Saudi. Parang ganun.
Yes,
Mga
yes,
Pinoy,
exactly.
no? And
Yes,
yet,
yes.
and at least for you, you're in the minority kasi you're in banking and you're in ano pa, in analytics, no? Or ano, uh, I mean, how many people will say, "Well, I work in capital management." It's not like something you hear every day, and especially in a large global bank.
Yeah, I think there's konti lang. I think when I joined the analytics team in where I work right now, I think I was probably the first female, and then of course there were some people who joined already. But out of 10, there was one at the beginning, and then two or three have joined. And my boss my boss is female, so it's still a minority, but and you kind of feel now, okay, it's slowly seeping into the analytics world. I'm pretty sure it's going to be more commonplace over time. Especially it's a lot of push right now, right? So it's a lot of women in STEM. I'm particularly proud of my sister. She's actually doing laser science, which is something that's also for me unheard of from my background. I mean, what do you do in laser science? But she's enjoying her job, and here in the UK at least, it's very much encouraged for women to go into that path as well.
So is
So
laser science as in study of lasers? Tama? Tama ba?
she yeah, physics mostly, so
Laser
study of light.
physics? Wow.
Yeah, physics. If you like, if for people who like physics, I mean, the going into lasers, investigating lasers is something that might be of interest, and they're pretty powerful. As now, I mean, I'm only like a spectator from a conversation point of view, and it's fascinating what we can do with it, and it's also um, pretty powerful, which can be, for governments to use, not just it's used for health and everywhere, healthcare, military, or and other things. We can cut things through light. It's just it's just a fascinating way of saying it, but yeah, it's a good way to apply physics knowledge.
So the next time someone asks her, in which hospital do you work? Well, I cut things with light. And maybe yun na yung magandang sagot. Yeah. Just being conscious of the time. No, we've really shredded an hour and
Yeah.
a half.
Oo
Right?
nga eh.
Maybe for the remainder of the conversation, and I'd love to keep talking about this. No, um, talk about what you're looking forward to. I surmise you're about to finish your master's degree in what is it? Tama ba? Complex
Complex
systems.
systems. Yeah, complex systems modeling. So I'm juggling working full time and studying part time. So I'm hopefully going to finish my master's as well. I look forward to being able to share a bit more about my experience in mathematics, in transitioning geographies, in transitioning careers in a more systematic way, maybe mentoring or tutoring people. Um, I look forward to going back and visiting the Philippines again. I mean, it's been 3 years, 2 or 3 years. I can't remember now. I think 3 years. Of course, with the pandemic. But in terms of mathematics, I do want to share a little bit more through writing, maybe, or through conversations like this, or through proper mentoring younger analysts who want to also build their lives around mathematics and analysis. And I think there's opportunity to share a bit of knowledge on that.
Yeah. Any let's say if you could talk to yourself 15 years ago, or I guess the next Valerie, coming out of high school, and maybe considering a career in, I don't know, banking or math. How it, and if you were to mentor someone like yourself 15 years ago, what are like some life hacks you would recommend upfront? Na okay, avoid that na. Don't go through that anymore. Or I guess times have also changed, no? The opportunities have, I would
Yes.
imagine, widened then for someone with a math background. So
Yes.
do you have like a top five or top three parang mga advice or list for women like starting out in their careers?
Yeah, I think play the long game is what I would say. That's very relevant for any experience, I think. So if you don't get the role that you like at the first, know know your long-term goals. I'm very much about long-term planning. So if you have to wait it out and work on it as best as you can, and then um, strive to navigate the industry you want. That's the first one. And the second one is um, it's more to do with the fraud or the imposter syndrome. You have to, well, for at least for young women who, if you were like me at the time, before, um, if you have to recognize it and then build, make spend time to overcome it. It's not going to be a month of work. It's not going to be even 6 months. It might be years. But if there's enough material already out there, I guess it's one of the benefits of the internet. If you take that into heart and take into account, and then um, strive to be a little bit better every time you make a conversation, you can do this. That will get you to a point where, okay, you actually believe you are good. Um, and the third one is more to do with um, being gender blind. Like, I guess from a woman's standpoint, you don't see yourself as a woman talking to a man. You see yourself as someone who puts out ideas because they're ideas. And on the flip side, you don't see a man talking like a man because he's a man, but you have to first consider the ideas that he or she might be sharing, regardless of the gender. So that's the gender equality becomes two-way. We are at risk of thinking we are too entitled to gender equality benefits, that we might be overstepping, the other side, where on the flip side, maybe we might be blind to aspects where men are um, at a disadvantage. So that's also not something we want to be careful about. That's in the context of International Women's Month.
Okay, perfect. I guess that's about a note as we can end it, Yeah, but I want to thank you, Valerie, for sharing your journey with us. As I said, it's at least for me, you're one of the luckiest people I know, no, who navigated a career, even with ups and downs, and then now you have, I guess, the benefit of that. No, looking back, no, parang sabi nga nila, uh, you are where you are not because of the path that lies ahead of you, but the path behind you. No? So you made those decisions. And then yung pala, can I ask one last question before ano rin? Did you ever have a need for like parang a community, no, to get support from? Because I hear that also a lot.
Oh yeah.
Like is there like a group of women you draw strength from, or a Filipino community or something like some, or or is that even relevant? I mean, not just
I think it
within the
is. It's very relevant. For my particular case, it's more a scientific community that I draw strength from, because um, in uni, for example, I talk with like-minded people who talk distributions or talk eigenvalues, or there's nothing weird about that.
oh man, a math community. Ha.
Yes, yes, it is exciting. So all the discussions, forums, and all those things, it's very nice to have. So I don't I have made a decision to mm, mm, seek out a diverse uh, community in wherever I move, whether in New Zealand or in the UK, in order to get a broad perspective about how is it to live here. But then uh, the ideas I sort of tend to how to put it. I tend to link up to people who are interested in ideas, mathematics, a lot about history as well, because when moving to other countries, you get a lot of context with by knowing their history, the history of the country you're living in, and I also like the perspective. Actually, you mentioned age discrimination. Um, I don't tend to choose who I talk to based on the age, but depends on what you bring to the table. Some it's a lot of it. It has to be you have to be open minded, I guess. And but to answer your question, the community is a big thing. So if you're into analytics, seek out analytics forums. If you're into basketball, you seek out basketball forums, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing everywhere. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny nga, no? As one of the last thoughts na, like, I'm guilty of this too. When you talk marketing segments and you talk age demographics, no? Millennial, Gen Z, Gen X. It's funny how companies bucket us into like 20-year 20-year segments.
Okay.
Uh,
Did they
uh,
find that meaningful, or
well,
maybe
yun nga
just a
eh.
hunch?
I, I I see it being done as a method.
Yeah.
Let's say for product, product design.
Yes.
But then in real life, you don't really seek the Gen X community, right? Or the Gen Y community. That's absurd. Even though, yeah, there are some tendencies for age and generation,
Yeah, definitely.
but
Yes, they are.
it's not something you, at least for me. Then it's not something I seek. No,
No.
I do see that I tend to talk to more people who seem to be at a younger bracket. It's not that I avoid talking to people my age or people older. Kataon lang, no? And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
But
it's
I think
interesting.
to your point of bucketing, by age as a marketing strategy, because we're building up so much data right now, I think the old notions may be a little bit challenged, but it has to come out from the data. Obviously, some age groups will tend to think the same. They have the same, experience. They experience the same crisis. They experience the same political regimes and all those things. They will tend to vote specific ways. But then with accumulation of data, especially now, we freely give our data now to the social media platforms. They can completely mine that and see that there are nuances within age groups, and that's a fascinating field as well. If you know, as we go on analytics journey.
Yeah, ano nga eh. Although I don't necessarily do marketing analytics as much as I used to. I've found that grouping people by interest rather than by, traditional demographics like location, age, mga ganyan, gender.
Yeah,
Parang matters less. It matters more na, okay, create an interest group around data, create an interest group around artificial intelligence, or cooking for that matter,
yeah, yeah,
that seems to work better, no? And
yeah,
you can see people self-organize based on interest anyway. So I think
yeah,
moving forward, that will probably be the, I don't know, the frontier talaga. Even in, I don't know if banking will be quick to adopt that, no? Because I would imagine demographic segmentation is still part of, let's say, a credit score. Pero I think interest and behavior will probably be the best way to categorize people, if there is. At saka, even if you wanted to use demographics, there's just more and more pushback against like racial discrimination, age
yeah.
discrimination, gender discrimination. So at some point, we may even lose the ability to use those variables, no, in a model.
By
Uh,
regulation, yeah,
by regulation. So paano na, no? If
yeah.
most of your data analytics is based on that, which is pretty shallow if you think about it now, no?
But I think it's also an output of the data that's already there, because all our lives governments have collected age, gender, location, all of it is there. Therefore, we use that And then you now see headlines of X% of, I don't know, women are with the gender pay. I mean, it's everything that can be related to gender is not everything, but you see what I mean. Because we have so much data with respect to with regards to the gender division of people, then we tend to use that. But as we build our data over time, interest groups is one of them. Um, uh, Political perspective is another, or other things which will be useful in the future will be of massive influence to corporate decisions. And now maybe the data ethics question will be, who owns the data? I mean, can you actually what is the ownership of data? What does that even mean? And then if you know your data rights, do we have data rights, for example? We're starting to build on it, but do we have data rights, and how do you enforce that? And how do you, it's a big question, and it's one thing that will probably be one of the key questions that data professionals will be tackling over time.
Yeah, even at the kind of the global level, um, although this is a digression na, no, from our topic, but
Yeah. It's okay.
people have started to clamor for an update to the Declaration of Human Rights,
Oh yeah,
which
exactly.
conveniently does not necessarily address data. No?
Yeah.
The word data doesn't even appear in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Ah,
Pero if you think about it, everything that's a human right is also a data right, or the other way around. No? Parang, I mean, who are you? Your identity is a data point. It's your birth
yes.
certificate, whatever, it's your passport. And you respect someone for being a citizen of a country, but you don't necessarily respect the data that supports that. No? And then you encounter, again, complete digression na to, pero there's some areas where we're beginning to coin this term data poverty, for example, where
Oh yeah.
there's
Yeah.
some people who don't even have a birth certificate because they were just so poor, na they
Yeah.
didn't register themselves. And then that's almost always the first document that's a gateway to something else. Like you have a birth certificate, you can get a driver's license, you can get a passport.
Or
So
a
if you,
banking,
and then once you have those
access to.
IDs, you can have a banking account. No?
Yeah.
And so what about people who don't have one of those? Paano na? They're shut out of the matrix basically.
Mm.
And there are people like that, no? They are data impoverished, and then later parang ano, lalo na in the pandemic, during the pandemic, like nowadays, data is a premium. Um,
Oh yeah.
access to an internet connection. Not everyone
Yes.
has one.
Yes. Yes.
And now that correlates directly with education. If you don't have
Yes.
an internet connection, you can't learn anything.
Yeah.
Like wow, no. Uh,
That's one of the things I had a conversation about internet access being a human right and you can also, I googled it immediately and said, okay, that this is another that's another
sabi
conversation.
nga nila, it's now one more layer under the Maslow's pyramid, no,
Yeah,
hierarchy.
hierarchy of
Parang
needs.
on the
Yes.
bottom, and then you have Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi and sockets. Sockets yung
Yeah,
pinakamababa.
yeah.
If you can't plug your
Energy.
phone anywhere, then you
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
have Wi-Fi.
exactly. There's a book Bill Gates came it's published just last month. He talked about energy poverty
Mm,
because in his experience, people, I mean, children who are studying under a candle with the candlelight, how can their communities develop if they don't have energy, they don't
yeah.
have power? So yeah, many questions of our time that will be tackled.
Well, we gotta save something for the next chat, diba? So sige, we'll end it here.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot,
Doc. Thank
Valerie.
you.
Hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Doc. I enjoyed it.